Good morning.
Good morning.
It is a gift to worship with you all today. Some of you I saw when I came to Bible study, so it's good to see you again. Deep gratitude for my friend and colleague, Pastor Athena, for the invitation and opportunity to worship with you. I do believe, if nothing else, there is something for us to chew on today. So go ahead and get into the word. You heard the text in full, but I like to zero in on a small part. I said to try to preach all of that in the time allotted is not going to work. So what we're going to do is focus it on one verse, the first one. And it reads, "But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies." I like to preach from the subject today, at the feet of the elders. Will you pray with me? Breathe again, O God. In this space, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our collective hearts call us into deeper love with one another and the world around us. Thank you for being here, God. May we receive what we need on today. In the many names we have grown to call you, but today I call on Jesus the Christ. Amen. At the feet of the elders. Growing up, I was fascinated by the elders around me. I loved the storytelling shared with knowing looks across the room, deep belly laughter, and every once in a while a child when something got really good to them, but they didn't always want to say all that was happening. See, especially the deaconesses at my church. This group of women elders handled setting up the communion and mostly everything at church. I wanted to help, and so they invited me and said, "Go ahead and sit down," Mother Faye said, noting that the only real seat was on the floor. And so sit down I did, and at their feet I sat. I learned the latest church gossip. I learned how to properly fold a cloth napkin. I learned that even when they amened in the sanctuary, they did not always agree with the preacher. And I learned a whole lot about the difference between power and titles. I love to bring my problems to them, or conundrums or wonderings, because they let me. And even if they didn't have a solution, they always had some wisdom. As I moved from 5 to 15 to my early adult years, and even now, my problems change, but yet their presence as community, both here and in the beyond, remain consistent, reminding me that sometimes, perhaps often, the wisdom I need is to pause and sit at the feet and the wisdom of my elders. Friends, this week required a different posture with this text. I exegeted, I wrestled, I turned and turned, and yet I couldn't get past my own anger. Really, Jesus? Love who? When? What? Now? You sure you meant 2025, right now in this time? I was so prepared to preach against the text, which sometimes is reasonable. But something told me to sit again, to listen again, and show it with the curiosity of my younger self at the feet of those who might have been here a little longer. So what might this ancient text say today that requires me to listen once again? See, the first elder I heard as I sat down to listen was my late great-grandmother, Helen Sturgis. She used to say, "I can tell when you are hearing or when you are listening by how you respond." See, when I was just hearing her, she said I would give her a good head nod, like, okay. But my attention was elsewhere. When I was listening, she could tell by how I asked questions and what my response was. See, before Jesus says anything else in our text today, he says, "But to you who are listening." Now imagine Jesus was saying, "But to you who are listening to me." Now, it's easy to slide past this, but I think that this was intentional. This was not for the folks who were just there to be there. This was a call to those who wanted to learn, to grow, to respond to something that was being said. Now, beloveds, this can be challenging, just this first part. There's actually so much to listen to, so much to respond to. The news is quite loud. Social media is loud. People's opinions are loud. Panic is loud. Fear is loud. Chaos is loud. And while we don't always choose what we hear or encounter, we actually do choose what we listen and respond to. To those who are listening, Jesus says, and then drops the mic, "Love your enemies." Maybe your body reacted like mine. Something I'm happy to hear, to know that I'm not alone. It sounds cute. It sounds like a good idea. But to listen and respond to this is something else. Love your enemies. Well, wait, who are my enemies? My pop-up, Henry Bias, always used to say, "You only have an enemy if you make one." Now, he had a lot of sayings, and so I thought he was just talking. But this text brought me again to his feet. This phrase, you choose to have enemies. You can't always choose who makes you theirs. Now, maybe you're like, what are you talking about? There are plenty of enemies around. You said, perhaps you saw a face in your mind or a group. Maybe the scrolling of news cycles made it very clear for you, or someone at work who gets on your first and last nerves appeared to show up in your face. But according to Webster, and I'm a word nerd, I love rhetoric. According to Webster, an enemy is one seeking to injure, harm, overthrow, or throw into confusion an opponent. You might be harmed because someone sees you as an enemy, but for them to be your enemy, you have to make a choice to seek to harm them. I wonder if the writer could have written, love those who see you as an enemy and whom you are tempted to make one back. It would be easy to injure when you have been injured, easy to overthrow when you feel overthrown, easy to disorder and confuse when you feel like that's been done to you, easy to turn into an internet troll when you see folks on Facebook acting a fool, easy to hate them even when you feel like you have every right to do so, easy to know that you are deemed an enemy and so you choose to return that right back, easy to be complicit with powers and say nothing when you hold privileges not under attack. It's easy to choose by inaction or action an enemy. And yet, there's something about this gospel and Jesus' request that don't just ask us to shift, but ask us to develop a whole different framework. To treat someone as an enemy is to see them as unworthy of love, unworthy of care, unworthy of redemption, incapable of change, and actively wanting harm to come to them. Jesus says, listen, instead of choosing to see them as an enemy, choose to see them as someone to love. Instead of the ease of returning hate with more hate, ask, what might goodness be asking of me? So, if I'm listening to Jesus, if I'm choosing to choose something beyond the impulse of making an enemy, what then am I to do? So in just one sentence, Jesus gives us the hard but clear invitation, love. And not just any type of love. The love in this particular text is agape love. Agape love that calls us to love deeply and fully ourselves, our beloveds, our community, and to build frames of flourishing instead of systems of oppression. As I wrestled, it occurred to me that perhaps some understanding of this robust and engaging love might be found where I've received my best wisdom. So I sat again in books and in literature, in movies and in prayer at the feet of elder ancestors to listen to what they might say about love and loving your enemies. Because to be honest, I didn't have it. So here's some of the things that they said for us personally, interpersonally, and collectively. First, loving your enemies requires a wrestling with self-love. See, I believe too much in a tender and loving God to think that the love means staying in places of abuse. This text has been used to ask people to stay in places of harm, and that's not what it's saying. Writer and activist James Baldwin posits, quote, love does not begin and end the way we think it does. Love is a battle. Love is a war. Love is a growing up. Love your enemies. It is a growing up. It is a spiritual maturity. It requires that we listen and that we battle internally because our impulse is to return what we receive. It recognizes that a war might ensue within us to overcome our inclination for imperialism, our digestion of capitalism, and the seduction of supremacy, not to actually change the system, but just to be the ones in power. This internal battle is not one that ends, but one that can shift when we continue to choose the practices of love and grow the agile muscles that ask, how can I love me and them simultaneously? And to fight as much as you can to hold that tension and not lose yourself in the work. Secondly, I heard loving your enemies also calls us into a new framework interpersonally. The great writer and anthropologist Zora Neale Hurston writes, quote, love makes your soul crawl out from its hiding place. In our one-to-one or small groups, in your family, friendships, partners, colleagues, in the people you encounter every day, someone's action can truly make them feel like an enemy. But I deeply believe at our best and deepest selves, we want to be kind, we want to be good, we want to be loving. At our soul level, it is antithetical to our creation of a God who breathed love into us to operate out of anything that doesn't look like love. And so in our interactions, even in the brief moments or long moments when you decide someone is an enemy, we might ask, How can my love, my choice to have compassion, my decision to show mercy actually call someone's soul out of its hiding place? And how might I receive that same call when it's me who's not acting in love? Wickedness is a hiding place of the soul. Being less than your belovedness is a hiding place of the soul. Complacency is a hiding place of the soul. Liberalism without liberation is a hiding place of the soul. Upholding systems that harm those that carry the very breath is a hiding place of the soul. Now, this love doesn't always look like showing up. Sometimes that's actually self-harm, especially when it's your very embodiment under attack. It can look like boundaries. It can look like walking away so that you don't do harm. It can look like demanding accountability when someone is operating out of systemic practice instead of soul possibility. But when we choose care, possibility, invitation, curiosity, listening, someone's soul is invited to crawl out from its hiding place and be seen and cared for and loved and changed and redeemed. It is a response, a listening to the voice of Jesus in a loud world that says, care deeply and build with those you encounter in deep abiding love. And perhaps we might see the gift, the miracle of a soul we once saw hiding amidst us in the abundance of love. Now, finally, loving your enemies is a call to imagining a new collective future through practices of love in the present. Afrofuturist Octavia Butler says, love quiets fear. As an Afrofuturist, Butler's work engages the history of peoples of African descent along the realities of today to imagine forward a future. She sees Black people well in the future, in spite of what she sees. In this short quote, she says so much. Where love is loud, fear does not have as much room to speak. We will not have a future, or at least one that's sustainable for those that continue to be disenfranchised if we continue to be run by the fear and fragility of white supremacy. This type of love is not weak love, it's not puny love, it's not hearts across pages love, it's not the hard work that demands that we reflect on beloved community. It refuses to believe that we must live in the oppressions, refuses to succumb to the fear of equity for fear that we will lose our privileges too. This love tells fear to take a seat. Love that says, no, that's wrong, even when it makes family dinners uncomfortable. It's a love that says people deserve better. Capitalism isn't cute. Supremacy should not reign, even when it would be easier to be silent. This love that fights for the rights of those around, even when it's not popular. It is loud, screaming from the rooftops, enough is enough. And not asking those around you to be loud for you, particularly where you hold privilege, while you perform the niceties of love, while living in the practices of fear. As per usual, the Lucan Gospel, this text in the Lucan Gospel is a call to change the realities of the systemic. It is an overturn of the captivity of oppression towards something that looks like freedom and flourishing for all. And I deeply believe that we can have it. I have to. That's what hope looks like. Maya Angelou writes, in the flush of love's light, we dare to be brave. And suddenly, we see that love costs all that we are and will ever be. Yet, it is only love that will set us free. Love requires that we evolve, that we grow up, that we change, we commune, we gather, we heal, we grow, we forgive, we are brave, and we repeat. And maybe, as these elders have offered us, if it can remove masks, quiet fear, call our souls out from their hiding places, just maybe there's a possibility of freedom and flourishing for all. To those who are listening, Jesus says, love your enemies. Amen and Ashe.